write 3,758 correct to the nearest 1,000. So the first thing we'll want to look for is our thousands digit, which is this 3 here. And then we're going to want to look at our number after, which will be the hundreds column. And if the hundreds column is less than 5, then we'll round our number down. However, if it's 5 or more, then we'll round our number up. So as we can see in this number, 7 is greater than 5, so therefore we're going to round it up to 4,000. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer. Simplify y plus 3y minus 2y. So when adding and subtracting algebra, it works in the same way as adding and subtracting numbers. We just add the letter at the end of the term. So we can rewrite y plus 3y minus 2y as 1y plus 3y minus 2y. And we can now add and subtract them as we would with numbers. So we can start off with the addition. 1y plus 3y will be equal to 4y, and then the minus 2y. And then 4y minus 2y will be equal to 2y. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this will be for the correct answer. Write down all the factors of 18. Now a factor of 18 will be a whole number which we can multiply by another whole number to give 18. So we can start off with 1. 1 multiplied by 18 gives us 18. So this tells us that the number 1 and the number 18 are both factors of 18. So we can then move on to 2. 2 multiplied by 9 also gives us 18. And the numbers 2 and 9 are both whole numbers, so we therefore know that 2 and 9 are also factors of 18. Next we can move on to 3. 3 multiplied by 6 also gives us 18. Therefore 3 and 6 are both factors of 18. Now if we move on to 4, now 4 multiplied by 4.5 gives us 18. However, not both of these numbers are whole numbers, so this means that 4 is not a factor of 18. And this applies for 5 as well. And if we move on to 6, we've already written this down as a factor. So we therefore know that the only factors of 18 are 1, 2, 3, 6, 9 and 18. And this is our final answer. And we'll get 1 mark for having 3 correct factors and 2 marks for having all 6 correct factors. The table gives information about the prices of cinema tickets. Mr. Edwards and his 3 children go to the cinema. It is cheaper for Mr. Edwards to buy 1 family ticket rather than 4 separate tickets. How much cheaper? So if Mr. Edwards is bringing 3 children with him, then this means he'll be buying 1 adult ticket for himself and then 3 child tickets for the 3 children. So we can start off by working out how much this will cost. So the price for the 4 tickets will be £7.80, which is the price for the adult ticket, and then 3 times by £5.80, which accounts for the 3 child tickets. And if we put this into our calculator, this gives us an answer of £25.20. Now this is the price of buying 4 separate tickets. However, we want to work out how much cheaper it is to buy a family ticket. So in order to do this, we'll want to work out the difference between the prices of a family ticket and the prices of the separate tickets. So to do this, we can do £25.20 minus £24.30. And this gives us an answer of 90p. And this is our final answer. Now the units in our answer is an important thing to remember for this question, as we'll lose a mark if we don't write our units. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for beginning our method to work out the prices of the 4 separate tickets. We'll get our second mark for the full method to work out the difference between the two prices, and our third mark for the correct answer with the correct units. The film starts at 6:45 p.m. The film lasts 102 minutes. What time does the film finish? So the first thing we'll need to know for this question is that 60 minutes is equal to 1 hour. And if this is the case, then 102 minutes is equal to 1 hour 42 minutes. And this will be useful when working out the time the film finishes. So if the film starts at 6:45 and it lasts 102 minutes, then it will finish 1 hour and 42 minutes later than 6:45. So the first thing we can do is add an hour onto this time on the left. So after an hour, the time will be 7:45 p.m. and there will be 42 minutes left of the film. So the next thing we can do is add 15 minutes, and this will make the time 8 p.m. And if we do 42 minus 15, this tells us that there are 27 minutes left of the film. So now the final thing we can do is add 27 minutes to the time. And this tells us that the film finishes at 8:27 p.m. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for understanding and applying that 60 minutes is equal to 1 hour, and our second mark for the correct answer. Ty has a large bottle of shampoo. There are 2 litres of shampoo in the large bottle. Ty also has some empty small bottles. Each small bottle can be completely filled with 150 millilitres of shampoo. How many small bottles can be completely filled with the shampoo from the large bottle? So the first thing we'll want to do is change the units from the 2 litres of shampoo into millilitres so that we can compare the two values. So 1 litre is equal to 1000 millilitres. So this means that 2 litres is equal to 2000 millilitres. So now the next thing we need to do is work out how many small bottles can be filled from 2000 millilitres of shampoo. So to do this, we're going to want to do 2000 divided by 150. And this gives us an answer of 13 1/3. Now an important part of this question is we want to know how many small bottles can be completely filled with 150 millilitres of shampoo. Now if 13 1/3 bottles are filled, then this means the number of bottles which are completely filled will be 13. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for converting the units so that they're both in either litres or millilitres. We'll get our second mark for working out how many bottles of shampoo will be filled. And our third mark for the correct answer, which is how many small bottles can be completely filled. The incomplete pictogram shows information about the number of cycles sold in a shop on Tuesday, on Wednesday and on Thursday. A total of 20 cycles were sold on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, 8 cycles were sold on Friday, 15 cycles were sold on Saturday. Use this information to complete the pictogram. So in this pictogram, each one of these circles represents a certain number of cycles. So we want to work out how many cycles each one of these circles is equal to. So we've been told that 20 cycles are sold on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. So we can start off by counting up how many circles there are in the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday column. So we can start off by counting the number of circles there are in the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday row. So there's 1 circle in the Tuesday row, there's 2.5 circles in the Wednesday row, and there's 1.5 circles in the Thursday row. And if we add these up, this gives us a total of 5 circles. So this means that 5 circles on this pictogram is equal to 20 cycles. So if we do 20 divided by 5, this tells us how many cycles each of these circles are equal to. So 20 divided by 5 gives us an answer of 4. And this can form part of our key. So we can write that each one of these circles is equal to 4 cycles. And we can now use this information to complete the rest of the pictogram. So if 8 cycles were sold on Friday, and each one of these circles on the pictogram is equal to 4 cycles, then this means we'll need to draw 2 circles to represent the 8 cycles. So 15 cycles were sold on Saturday. So in order to work out how many circles we'll need to draw onto our pictogram, we can do 15 divided by 4. So 15 is the number of cycles, and 4 is the number of cycles which the key represents. And this gives us an answer of 3.75. So this means we'll need to draw out 3.75 of these circles onto the pictogram in the Saturday row in order to represent the 15 cycles. And this is what our completed pictogram should look like. Now this question's worth 3 marks, and we'll get all 3 marks for correctly completing the pictogram with the correct key. BCD is a straight line. ABC is a triangle. Show that triangle ABC is an isosceles triangle. Give a reason for each stage of your working. So the first thing we'll want to know is what an isosceles triangle is. So an isosceles triangle is a triangle with 2 equal angles and 2 equal side lengths. So as you can see in this question we've not been given any side lengths, so the angles will be the part which we're interested in. So something we've been told in the question is that BCD is a straight line. So this is this line at the bottom here. So one of the rules for angles on a straight line is that all angles on a straight line add up to 180. So what this means is that angle ACB, which is this angle here, added to 117 degrees will give us 180 degrees. And if this is the case, then this means that angle ACB will be equal to 180 minus 117, which gives us an answer of 63 degrees. And we've been told to give a reason for each stage of your workings. And the reason for this is because angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. So we can mark this onto our diagram. So as we can see, we have 2 out of 3 of the angles of this triangle. Now angles in a triangle add to 180 degrees. So this means that angle BAC, which is this one up here, will be equal to 180 degrees minus 54 degrees minus 63 degrees. And this gives us an answer of 63 degrees. And our reason for this is because all angles in a triangle will add up to 180 degrees. So again, we can mark this onto our diagram. So what we can see, we now know all of the angles inside triangle ABC, and 2 of the angles are 63 degrees and the other angle is 54 degrees. Now our definition for an isosceles triangle was a triangle with 2 equal angles and 2 equal sides. And as you can see, we've proven that our triangle has 2 equal angles. So the final thing we can do for this question is write a summary statement. So we can write that therefore triangle ABC is an isosceles triangle because 2 of the angles are equal in size. Now this question's worth 4 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the size of angle ACB. We'll get our second mark for working out the size of angle BAC. We'll get our third mark for the reasons for our working. And our fourth mark for working out that the reason that the triangle is an isosceles triangle is because 2 of the angles are equal in size. The picture shows a bus next to a building. The bus has a length of 12 metres. The bus and the building are drawn to the same scale. Work out an estimate for the height in metres of the building. So the first thing we'll want to do is work out how many metres each centimetre in this drawing is equal to. So if we measure the length of the bus using a ruler, it should measure 2 centimetres. And because the bus is 12 metres, then this means that 2 centimetres represents 12 metres. And if we divide this by 2, then this shows us that 1 centimetre represents 6 metres. So now the next thing we'll want to do is measure the height of this building. So again, using a ruler, we can measure this as 5 centimetres. So we've worked out our scale as being 1 centimetre is equal to 6 metres. And in order to get from 1 centimetre to 5 centimetres, we'll want to multiply by 5. So we can do the same to the right-hand side of this equation. And this tells us that the building is 30 metres high. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for showing that we understand that 2 centimetres represents 12 metres, and our second mark for the correct answer. Nida writes down 2 different prime numbers. She adds together her 2 numbers. Her answer is a square number less than 30. Find 2 prime numbers that Nida could have written down. So the first thing we can do is start off by writing down all of the square numbers that are less than 30. So 1 multiplied by 1 gives us 1. 2 multiplied by 2 gives us 4. 3 multiplied by 3 gives us 9. 4 multiplied by 4 gives us 16. And 5 multiplied by 5 gives us 25. 6 multiplied by 6 is not less than 30, so we can't use this for our answer. The next thing we can do is write down some prime numbers. So the prime numbers below 30 are 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23 and 29. So we want to find 2 of these numbers which we'll add together to make one of these numbers. So if we start off with the square number 1, as we can see there aren't any prime numbers which we can add together to make 1, so we can cross this out. Next we can move on to 4, and again there are no 2 numbers which we could add together to give us 4. And although 2 add 2 gives us 4, Nida has written down 2 different prime numbers, so this will not work for 4. Next we can move on to 9. So if we take a look at our list of prime numbers, 2 add 7 gives us 9. So 2 and 7 are 2 prime numbers which we can add together to make a square number. And there are no other prime numbers which we can add together to give us 9, so we can move on to 16. So again, if we take a look at our list of prime numbers, 3 add 13 gives us 16, and also 5 add 11 gives us 16. And finally 25, 2 add 23 gives us 25. And these are our 4 possible sets of prime numbers which we could add together to give us a square number. And any sets of these prime numbers would get us the mark for the answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for identifying at least one set of prime numbers which we'll add together to give us a square number, and our second mark for one of these correct answers. Jim thinks of a number. 2/3 of Jim's number is 48. Work out 5/6 of Jim's number. So what we can do is we can let x be equal to Jim's number. So if 2/3 of Jim's number is 48, then this means that 2 over 3 multiplied by x will be equal to 48. So now with this we can work out what Jim's number is. So the first thing we can do is multiply both sides by 3, and 2 over 3x multiplied by 3 gives us 2x. And 48 multiplied by 3 gives us 144. So now the final thing we need to do in order to make x the subject is divide both sides by 2. And this tells us that x is equal to 72, and therefore Jim's number is equal to 72. So now the final thing we need to do for this question is work out 5/6 of 72. And to do this we can either do 72 divided by 6 multiplied by 5, or we can do 5 over 6 multiplied by 72. And this gives us a final answer of 60. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out what Jim's number is, and our second mark for working out 5/6 of this number. Jack's driving school has 2 offers. Offer 1, first driving lesson free, all other driving lessons normal price. Offer 2, all driving lessons 5% off the normal price. The normal price of a driving lesson is £24. Douglas is going to have 12 driving lessons. Which is the cheaper offer for the 12 driving lessons? Offer 1 or offer 2? You must show how you get your answer. So the first thing we'll need to know for this question is that the normal price of a driving lesson is £24. So if we start off with offer 1, if Douglas is going to have 12 driving lessons, but he'll get his first driving lesson free, then this means he'll only be paying for 11 lessons. So this will mean the price of his 12 driving lessons will be 11 multiplied by 24. And this gives us an answer of £264. So offer 2, he'll have to pay for all driving lessons, but he'll get 5% off the normal price. So the first thing we can do is work out the price of having 12 driving lessons at £24 each. So 12 multiplied by 24 gives us an answer of £288. So now the final thing we need to do for offer 2 is work out how much the lessons will cost after taking 5% off the normal price. So if we take 5% off the normal price, this means it will be 95% of the original price. So we can multiply 288 by 0.95 to work out what 95% of 288 will be. And this gives us an answer of £273.60. So as you can see, for Douglas to have 12 driving lessons, with offer 1 it would cost him £264, but with offer 2 it would cost him £273.60. So therefore it would be cheaper for Douglas to go for offer 1. So now the final thing we can do is write a summary statement. So we can write something along the lines of offer 1 is cheaper because £264 is less than £273.60. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the price of offer 1, our second mark for working out the price of offer 2, and our third mark for comparing the 2 values to show that offer 1 is cheaper. 2.5 kilograms of apples costs £3.60. Work out the cost of 3.5 kilograms of apples. So if 2.5 kilograms of apples costs £3.60, then we can work out the price of 1 kilogram of apples and then times this by 3.5. So in order to get from 2.5 to 1, we need to divide by 2.5. And then in order to get from 1 kilogram to 3.5 kilograms, we need to multiply by 3.5. So now we're going to do exactly the same calculations, but on this £3.60 on the right. So the first thing we'll do is divide by 2.5. And this tells us that the price of 1 kilogram of apples is £1.44. And now, as we did on the left-hand side, we're going to multiply this value by 3.5. And this gives us a value of £5.04. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the price of 1 kilogram of apples, and our second mark for timesing this value by 3.5 to work out the cost of 3.5 kilograms of apples. Complete the table of values for y equals a half x minus 1. So what we can see in this table is we've been given the values for x between -2 and 3. So we'll want to substitute these values of x into this equation to work out the values of y. So as you can see, we've been given the value for y when x equals -2, so we can start off with when x equals -1. So we can substitute this value of x in place of the x in the equation. And this tells us that y is equal to a half multiplied by -1 minus 1. So we'll start off by multiplying out the brackets. So a half multiplied by -1 gives us -1/2, and then -1/2 minus 1 tells us that y is equal to -3/2. Next we can move on to when x equals 0. So when x equals 0, y will be equal to a half multiplied by 0 minus 1. Now a half multiplied by 0 is 0, so this means that y is equal to -1. Next we can move on to x equals 1. When x equals 1, y will be equal to a half multiplied by 1 minus 1. A half multiplied by 1 is a half, and then a half minus 1 tells us that y is equal to -1/2. And finally when x equals 3, so y will be equal to a half multiplied by 3 minus 1. So a half multiplied by 3 is 3/2, and then 3/2 minus 1 tells us that y is equal to a half. Now this question's worth 2 marks, and you get both of these marks for correctly filling out the table. On the grid, draw the graph of y equals a half x minus 1 for all of the values of x from -2 to 3. So what we're going to want to do is we'll want to take both the x and y value from this table and then mark that point on this grid. So if we start off with when x equals -2, y equals -2. So we'll want to go -2 from the x-axis and then -2 down the y-axis. And our point should be here. Next we can move on to when x equals -1 and then y equals -3/2. So we'll go -1 on the x-axis and then -1.5 down the y-axis. And we can plot our point here. When x equals 0, y equals -1, so we'll want to go down -1 on the y-axis, and we can plot our point here. When x equals 1, y equals -1/2, so we'll move 1 across on the x-axis and -1/2 down on the y-axis. And as you can see, we're starting to form a straight line. So next we can move on to when x equals 2, y equals 0. So we'll just need to go along 2 on the x-axis. And finally when x equals 3, y equals 1/2. So we'll go 3 along on the x-axis and 1/2 up on the y-axis. So we've now plotted all 6 coordinates that we need to. However, we'll need to draw a line between these. So using a ruler, we want to draw a straight line through all of these points. And this is the graph of y equals a half x minus 1. And we'll get both marks for correctly completing the graph. Use your graph to find the value of x when y equals 0.3. So what we'll want to do with this question is we'll want to look at the y-axis. So 0.3 on the y-axis is here. And what we can do is we can draw a line parallel to the x-axis. And as we can see, the point in which this line meets our line that we drew is at the point when x equals 2.6. So our x-coordinate when y equals 0.3 is 2.6. Describe fully the single transformation that maps shape A onto shape B. So there's 2 marks available in this question, which means we need to include 2 pieces of information in this answer. And that will be the type of transformation that has taken place, and then where it's taken place. So if we take a look at the grid which we've been given, shape A is exactly the same size and same shape as shape B, however it's a mirror image. So this means that a reflection has taken place, and this can form part of our answer. So the line in which shape A has been reflected in is this line here, which is the x-axis. So in our answer we'll need to include that the reflection has taken place on the x-axis. And this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for saying that the transformation was a reflection, and the second mark for saying that it was in the y-axis. The ratio of the cost of 1 metre of cotton fabric to the cost of 1 metre of silk fabric is 2:5. Complete the table of cost. So the first thing we can do is write out this ratio. So what this means is that if 1 metre of cotton costs £2, then 1 metre of silk would cost £5. And we can use this to fill in our table. So the only piece of information we've been told in the table is that 2 metres of cotton fabric costs £6. So if we use our ratio, in order to get from 2 to 6 we need to multiply by 3. So we can do the same to the 5 for the silk. And this tells us that 2 metres of silk costs £15. So we can fill this into our table. So the next thing we can do is work out the price of 6 metres of cotton fabric. Now we know that 2 metres costs £6. So therefore if we divide both values by 2, then we can work out that 1 metre of cotton fabric will cost £3. And we can use this to fill in the cotton fabric part of the table. So if 1 metre of cotton fabric costs £3, then in order to work out what 6 metres will cost, we'll need to multiply 3 by 6. And 3 multiplied by 6 gives us £18. And we can use the same process for 8 and 9 metres. So 3 multiplied by 8 gives us £24. And then 3 multiplied by 9 gives us £27. And we can use the same process for the silk fabric, or we can use the ratio which we've been given in the question. So using the same process as before, 2 metres of silk fabric costs £15. And if we divide both values by 2, then this tells us that 1 metre will cost £7.50. So 6 multiplied by £7.50 gives us £45. 8 multiplied by £7.50 gives us £60. And finally 9 multiplied by £7.50 gives us £67.50. And this is our full table filled in. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get 1 mark for having at least 1 value correct in the cotton fabric row, our second mark for having at least 1 value correct in the silk fabric row, and our third mark for having a full correct table. Chloe has a van. She is going to use the van to deliver boxes. Each box is a cuboid, 40 cm by 30 cm by 35 cm. The space for boxes in the van has maximum length of 2.4 metres, maximum width of 1.5 metres, maximum height of 1.4 metres. The space for boxes is empty. Chloe wants to put as many boxes as possible into the van. She can put 3 boxes into the van in 1 minute. Assume that the space for boxes is in the shape of a cuboid. Work out how many minutes it should take Chloe to put as many boxes as possible into the van. So what we can see is the measurements for the boxes in centimetres, however the measurements for the van is in metres. So what we can do is we can convert the measurements for the van into centimetres. So 1 metre is equal to 100 centimetres. So this means that 2.4 metres is equal to 240 centimetres. 1.5 metres is equal to 150 centimetres. And then 1.4 metres is equal to 140 centimetres. So in this cuboid, the side which is 40 centimetres is the length, 30 centimetres is the width, and then 35 centimetres is the height. So now what we'll want to do is work out how many boxes we can fit along the length of this van, along the width of the van, and up the height of the van. So to do this we can divide the length of the box by the length of the van. So 240 divided by 40 gives us 6, and this means that 6 boxes will fit along the length of the van. Next we can use the same process to work out how many boxes will fit along the width. So the width of the van is 150 centimetres and the width of the boxes are 30 centimetres. And 150 divided by 30 gives us 5 boxes. And finally the height. The height of the van is 140 centimetres and the height of the box is 35 centimetres. And this gives us an answer of 4 boxes. So what this means is 6 boxes will fit along the length of the van, 5 boxes along the width, and then 4 boxes along the height. So in order to work out how many will fill the full van, we'll need to multiply these 3 numbers together. And 6 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 4 gives us 120 boxes. So the final part of this question is to work out how many minutes it would take Chloe to put the boxes into the van. So she can put 3 boxes into the van in 1 minute. However, we have 120 boxes. So to get from 3 to 120, we need to multiply by 40. So if we've increased the amount of boxes we have by 40, then we can increase the amount of time it will have taken by 40 also. So this means it will take 40 minutes to put as many boxes as possible into the van. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 4 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out how many boxes will fit along one of the edges. Our second mark for working out the total number of boxes which will fit into the van. Our second mark for working out the total number of boxes which will fit into the van. Our third mark for working out how many minutes it will take to put these boxes into the van. And our fourth mark for the correct answer. The space for the boxes might not be in the shape of a cuboid. Explain how this would affect the time it would take Chloe to put as many boxes as possible into the van. So in part A we worked out how many boxes would fit into the van, and all of the boxes fit perfectly inside of the van. However, if this van might not be in the shape of a cuboid, then the boxes may no longer fit inside this van perfectly. And what this means is that less boxes will fit into the van, so therefore it would take less time. So in our answer we can write that if the boxes no longer fit along each edge, then less boxes may fit into the van, meaning it would take less time. Now, although we've written in our answer that it would take less time, if we can argue that it may take more time, this would also get us the mark. So we could also write something like, because a different arrangement would be required, it may take more time. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for a suitable reason for our answer. Factorise 4m plus 12. So when factorising an expression, we want to find a common factor for all of the terms. So in this expression we had the terms 4m and 12. So we want a number which we can divide both 4 and 12 by. Now there's 2 options for this. We can either choose the number 2 or the number 4. However, if we want this expression in its simplest form, we can factorise out a 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 4 and we're going to put it on the outside of a bracket. And we're going to divide both of these terms by 4. So 4m divided by 4 will give us m, and then 12 divided by 4 will give us 3. And this is our factorised expression. Now if we wanted to check our answer, we could multiply this back out and check that we get the original expression. So we can do this by multiplying the 4 by both the m and the 3. And this would give us the original expression of 4m plus 12. And this question's worth 1 mark, and that's for the correct answer. Choose 2 words from the box above to make this statement correct. 5y is a blank in the blank 3x plus 5y. So it's helpful to understand what all these words mean in this box. So an expression is something which won't contain an equals sign or an inequality sign, but contains at least 2 terms and must have a plus or a minus or both in. An equation is something which will contain an equals sign. A formula will also contain an equals sign, however it's used to explain a rule. An identity will contain an identity symbol, which looks like this. An inequality will contain an inequality symbol, which could look something like this. A term is a single number or letter. A factor is a number which can be multiplied by another number to give a product. And then a multiple is the product of 2 whole numbers. So using these words, we can now fill in these gaps. So 5y is a blank in the blank 3x plus y. So we can see that 5y is contained in this 3x plus 5y. However, it's not a factor or a multiple of it, meaning it's just a term. And then 3x plus 5y does not contain any equality or inequality symbols, meaning it's an expression. So 5y is a term in the expression 3x plus 5y. And this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get 1 mark for writing that 5y is a term, and the second mark for saying that 3x plus 5y is an expression. Here is a sequence of patterns made with counters. Find an expression in terms of n for the number of counters in the pattern number n. So term 1 contains 4 counters. Term 2 contains 7 counters. And term 3 contains 10 counters. So what we can see from this pattern of numbers is that each time the number of counters is increasing by 3. So term 1 plus 3 counters gives us term 2, and then term 2 plus another 3 counters gives us term 3. So what this means is the first term in our expression will be 3n, where n is the term. So what we can do now is we can write out what 3n will be for the first 3 terms. So 3 multiplied by 1 gives us 3. 3 multiplied by 2 gives us 6. and then 3 multiplied by 3 gives us 9. And now what we're going to want to do is compare the number of counters with the term 3n. And what we can see is for the first 3 terms, in order to get from 3n to the actual number of counters, we'll need to add 1. So this means that our final expression is 3n plus 1. And we can check this by substituting in the values of n into this expression. So 3 multiplied by 1 plus 1 gives us 4. 3 multiplied by 2 plus 1 gives us 7. And then 3 multiplied by 3 plus 1 gives us 10. So this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for starting a method to find the nth term, and our second mark for the correct answer. Bayo has 90 counters. Can Bayo make a pattern in this sequence using all 90 of his counters? You must show how you get your answer. So the term that we worked out in part A of this question was 3n plus 1. So we want to know whether 90 is one of the terms of 3n plus 1. So what we can do is make 3n plus 1 equal to 90, and then rearrange this equation to make n the subject. So the first thing we can do is minus 1 from both sides, and this tells us that 3n is equal to 89. And finally we can divide by 3. And 3n divided by 3 gives us n, and 89 divided by 3 gives us 29.67. Now if 90 was included in the sequence 3n plus 1, then n would be equal to a whole number, because n is the number of the term. So therefore Bayo cannot make this pattern from 90 counters. So the final thing we'll want to do is write a summary statement. So we can write something along the lines of, no, Bayo cannot make a pattern with 90 counters, because 90 is not a term in the sequence 3n plus 1. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for putting our expression from part A equal to 90, and our second mark for writing that Bayo will not be able to make a pattern in this sequence using his 90 counters, along with the supporting evidence. The table shows information about the heights of 80 children. Find the class interval that contains the median. So the first thing we'll need to know is what the median is. So the median is the middle value when they are arranged in ascending order. So if we arrange these 80 children in ascending order of heights, the 40th and the 41st values would be the 2 middle values. So if we take a look at this frequency column, if there are 4 people between 130 and 140 centimetres, and there are 11 people between 140 and 150 centimetres, then this means there are 15 people between 130 and 150 centimetres. If there are 15 people between 130 and 150 centimetres, and 24 people between 150 and 160 centimetres, then this means there will be 39 people between 130 and 160 centimetres. And then if there are 22 people between 160 and 170 centimetres, and 39 between 130 and 160 centimetres, then this means there will be 61 between 130 and 170 centimetres. So now if we take a look at these values, this means when arranged in height order, the 39th child up until the 61st child will be between 160 and 170 centimetres. So this means this is where the 40th and 41st child will be. So this means the class interval that contains the median will be the class interval 160 is less than the height, which is less than or equal to 170 centimetres. And this question's worth 1 mark, and that's for the correct answer. Draw a frequency polygon for the information in the table. So what we can see from this graph is on the x-axis we have the height of the children, and on the y-axis we have the frequency. Now, an important thing to remember for frequency polygons is that because the heights are in a class interval, we're going to want to take the midpoint of this interval. So, for example, the midpoint of 130 to 140 centimetres will be 135 centimetres. So if we start off with the first row, heights between 130 and 140 centimetres, so the midpoint is going to be 135 centimetres and the frequency will be 4. So we want to plot the point 135, 4, and this will be here. Next, 140 to 150 centimetres, the midpoint will be 145 centimetres and the frequency is 11. So we'll plot the point 145, 11. Heights between 150 and 160 centimetres, the midpoint will be 155 centimetres and the frequency is 24. So we'll plot the point 155, 24. Heights between 160 and 170 centimetres, the midpoint will be 165 centimetres and the frequency is 22. So we'll plot the point 165, 22. And finally, heights between 170 and 180 centimetres, the midpoint will be 175 centimetres and the frequency is 19. So we'll plot the point 175, 19. And now the final thing we'll need to do to complete this frequency polygon is join up these points which we've plotted using a ruler. And this is what our completed frequency polygon should look like. And this question's worth 2 marks, and we'll get both of these marks for correctly completing the frequency polygon. In London, 1 litre of petrol costs 108.9 pence. In New York, 1 US gallon of petrol costs $2.83. 1 US gallon equals 3.785 litres. £1 equals $1.46. In which city is petrol of better value for money, London or New York? You must show you're working. So the information we've been told in the question is that in London, 1 litre of petrol costs 108.9 pence. In New York, 1 US gallon of petrol costs $2.83. One US gallon equals 3.785 litres. And then £1 equals $1.46. So if we take a look at this New York column, if 1 US gallon costs $2.83 and 1 US gallon is equal to 3.785 litres, then this means that 3.785 litres will cost $2.83. Now, as we can see, the prices in London are given in pence. However, the prices in New York are given in dollars. So we're going to want to convert this into pounds and then convert it into pence. So if £1 is equal to $1.46, and we want to work out what $2.83 is equal to, if we do 2.83 divided by 1.46, this gives us an answer of 1.938. So this tells us that in order to get from 1.46 to 2.83, we need to multiply by 1.938. So this means we can do the same calculation with the price, and 1 multiplied by 1.938 gives us 1.938. So this tells us that £1.938 is equal to $2.83. And this also means that 3.785 litres costs £1.938. And £1.938 is equal to 193.8 pence. So as we can see, the prices in London are given per 1 litre. However, we've worked out the price of 3.785 litres. So in order to work out the price per litre in New York, we're going to want to divide both the amount of litres and the price by 3.785. And 3.785 divided by 3.785 gives us 1 litre. And then 193.8 divided by 3.785 gives us 51.2. So what we can see, in London, 1 litre of petrol costs 108.9 pence, and in New York, 1 litre of petrol costs 51.2 pence. Therefore, the prices in New York are cheaper. So the final thing we can do is write a summary statement. So we can write something along the lines of, it will be cheaper in New York because 1 litre in London costs 108.9 pence, whereas 1 litre in New York costs 51.2 pence. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the price of 3.785 litres in pounds. Our second mark for working out the price of 1 litre of petrol in New York, so that we can compare the prices of London and New York. And our third mark for stating that it will be cheaper in New York, along with the correct evidence. A gold bar has a mass of 12.5 kilograms. The density of the gold is 19.3 grams per centimetre cubed. Work out the volume of the gold bar. Give your answer correct to 3 significant figures. So we'll need to know the formula for the volume of a substance. And the formula for this is that volume is equal to mass divided by density. Now the next thing we'll need to do for this question is convert the mass of the gold bar into grams, because our density has been given in grams per centimetre cubed. And 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 grams. And in order to get from 1 kilogram to 12.5 kilograms, we need to multiply by 12.5. So we can do the same to the right-hand side of this equation. And 1,000 times by 12.5 gives us 12,500 grams. So now we're going to want to substitute the mass of the gold bar and the density of the gold into this equation. So our mass in grams is 12,500 and our density is 19.3. And this gives us an answer of 647.67. And the units for our volume is centimetres cubed. Now the final thing we'll need to do for this question is give our answer correct to 3 significant figures. And 647.67 to 3 significant figures gives us 648 centimetres cubed. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first 2 marks for a complete method, and we'll get our third mark for giving our answer correct to 3 significant figures. There are only blue pens, green pens and red pens in a box. The ratio of the number of blue pens to the number of green pens is 2 to 5. The ratio of the number of green pens to the number of red pens is 4 to 1. There are less than 100 pens in the box. Work out the greatest possible number of red pens in the box. So the first thing we can do is write out these 2 ratios in a more visual form. So the ratio of the number of blue pens to the number of green pens is 2 to 5. And then the ratio of the number of green pens to the number of red pens is 4 to 1. Now as we can see, both of these ratios contain the colour green. So what we can do is we can combine these 2 ratios. But in order to do this, we'll need the number of green pens to be the same. So the lowest common multiple of 5 and 4 is 20. So we can multiply this ratio by 4 and multiply this ratio by 5. So 2 multiplied by 4 gives us 8, and 5 multiplied by 4 gives us 20. And then 4 multiplied by 5 gives us 20, and 1 multiplied by 5 gives us 5. And what this means is the ratio of blue to green to red pens is 8 to 20 to 5. So we've been told in the question there are less than 100 pens in the box. So we want to work out what the maximum number of pens we can put in the box with this ratio. So what we can do, we can add these 3 values together, and 8 plus 20 plus 5 gives us 33. So we want to work out how many lots of 33 we can fit into 100. So 3 multiplied by 33 gives us 99. And if we added another 33 pens, this would then be over 100. So what this tells us is that 3 lots of this ratio will fit into the box. So what we need to do is we need to multiply this ratio by 3. So 8 multiplied by 3 is 24, 20 multiplied by 3 is 60, and then 5 multiplied by 3 is 15. And the ratio we'll want to look at is the third ratio here. And the value we want to look at is this end value here, as this is the number of red pens. So this tells us that 15 red pens will be in the box. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for putting the 2 ratios in a form so that we are able to combine them. We'll get our second mark for combining the ratios, and our third mark for the correct answer. Find the value of the reciprocal of 1.6. Give your answer as a decimal. So a reciprocal of a number is the number which we need to multiply by a specified number to give an answer of 1. So if we let x be the reciprocal of 1.6, then this means that x multiplied by 1.6 gives us an answer of 1. And we'll need to rearrange this equation to make x the subject and therefore work out the reciprocal of 1.6. So what we can do is we can divide both sides by 1.6, and x multiplied by 1.6 divided by 1.6 gives us x. And then if we put 1 divided by 1.6 into our calculator, this gives us an answer of 0.625. And this is our final answer. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer. Jess rounds the number x to 1 decimal place. The result is 9.8. Write down the error interval for x. So if Jess's result was 9.8, we need to think about the range of values which we would round to 9.8. So if we start with below the number 9.8, we would round any number which is equal to 9.75 or above up to 9.8. So because this is including 9.75, we want to put a greater than or equal sign. And then the error interval is for the x. And then the values in which we would round down to 9.8 would be any number which is less than 9.85. And because it's less than, we'll just put a less than symbol. And this is because if it also included 9.85, then this would be rounded up to 9.9. So this is our final answer. And this question's worth 2 marks, and this is for the correct answer with the correct values and correct symbols. Here is a rectangle. The length of the rectangle is 7 centimetres longer than the width of the rectangle. 4 of these rectangles are used to make this 8-sided shape. The perimeter of the 8-sided shape is 70 centimetres. Work out the area of the 8-sided shape. So the first thing we can do is we can let x be equal to the width of the rectangle. And the width of this rectangle is this shorter length here. So we can label this up as x. And in the question we've been told that the length of the rectangle is 7 centimetres longer than the width of the rectangle. So if the width of the rectangle is x centimetres, then the length of the rectangle will be equal to x plus 7 centimetres. So now what we can do is start labelling up the lengths of these sides on this shape. So if we start with this side here, this is one of the lengths of the rectangle, so we can label this up as x plus 7. This shorter length here at the top is the width, so this is x centimetres. This length will be x plus 7 centimetres. This is another width, so this will be x centimetres. Now this side here is equal to one length of this rectangle minus one width of this rectangle. And if the length of the rectangle is x plus 7 centimetres and the width is x centimetres, then this side length will be equal to x plus 7 minus x centimetres, which is 7 centimetres. The next side is x plus 7 centimetres. This is a width, so will be x centimetres. This is a length, so will be x plus 7 centimetres. The next side is a width. And then finally we have another side which will be equal to 7 centimetres. Because again, this is a length, and then this shorter side here is a width. Now we've been told that the perimeter of this 8-sided shape is 70 centimetres. So what this means is all of these side lengths added together will be equal to 70 centimetres. So what we can do is form an expression from this. So if we start with this x plus 7 here, then this gives us that 70 is equal to x plus 7 plus x plus 7 plus x plus 7 plus x plus x plus 7 plus x plus 7 plus x plus 7 plus x. And now what we want to do is simplify down all the x terms and then simplify down all the numerical terms. So if we count the number of x's we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 x's. So 70 will be equal to 8x, and if we add up all the numerical terms, we have 6 7s, so the perimeter of this shape will be equal to 8x plus 42. So now what we're going to want to do is simplify down this equation to make x a subject. So the first thing we can do is minus 42 from both sides, and 70 minus 42 gives us 28. And 8x plus 42 minus 42 gives us 8x. And now the final thing we can do is divide both sides by 8. And this tells us that x is equal to 3.5. Now the final part of this question is to work out the area of the 8-sided shape. Now we've been told that 4 of these rectangles make up this 8-sided shape. So we can multiply the area of this rectangle by 4, and this will give us the area of this shape here. So the area of a rectangle is equal to the width multiplied by the length. So in terms of this question, our width was x centimetres and our length was x plus 7 centimetres. Now the value we worked out for x was 3.5, so we can substitute this into our formula. And this gives us that 3.5 multiplied by brackets 3.5 plus 7 is equal to the area of the rectangle. So if we remember our BODMAS rules, we'll always do the brackets before the multiplication. So we can start off with 3.5 plus 7. And this gives us 10.5. And finally 3.5 multiplied by 10.5 gives us 36.25. However, this is just the area for one of the rectangles. So in order to work out the area of the 8-sided shape, which is made up of 4 of these rectangles, we'll need to multiply this value by 4. And this gives us a final answer of 147 centimetres squared. Now this question's worth 5 marks. We'll get our first mark for letting the side lengths be equal to x and x plus 7. We'll get our second mark for having at least 6 of these side lengths correct. We'll get our third mark for forming an equation from the perimeter. Our fourth mark for working out that the width is equal to 3.5 centimetres. And our final mark for the correct area. Work out 13.8 times 10 to the power of 7 multiplied by 5.4 times 10 to the power of negative 12. Give your answer as an ordinary number. So 13.8 multiplied by 10 to the power of 7 multiplied by 5.4 times 10 to the negative 12 is the same as writing 13.8 multiplied by 5.4 multiplied by 10 to the power of 7 multiplied by 10 to the power of negative 12. And this can make it easier to work out. And we can either put this straight into a calculator, or we can work it out in 2 separate halves. So if we start off with 13.8 multiplied by 5.4, this gives us an answer of 74.52. And then we can use our rules of indices to work out 10 to the power of 7 multiplied by 10 to the negative 12. And when multiplying numbers with powers, we'll add the powers together. So 7 add negative 12 gives us negative 5. So this means that 10 to the power of 7 multiplied by 10 to the power of negative 12 is equal to 10 to the power of negative 5. So now the final thing we need to do is change our answer into an ordinary number. So as before, we can either put this into our calculator, or we can use this negative 5 to know that we need to move this decimal point 5 places to the left. So if we rewrite 74.52 with 3 zeros in front, and then we move the decimal point 5 places to the left, this then places the decimal point here. And this is 74.52 times 10 to the negative 5 as an ordinary number. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks, and we'll get both marks for having the correct answer. When a drawing pin is dropped, it can land point down or point up. Lucy, Mel and Tom each drop the drawing pin a number of times. The table shows the number of times the drawing pin landed point down and the number of times the drawing pin landed point up for each person. Rachel is going to drop the drawing pin once. Whose results will give the best estimate for the probability that the drawing pin will land point up? Give a reason for your answer. So if we take a look at this table, the person whose results will give the best estimate for the probability the drawing pin will land point up will be the person who threw the drawing pin the most number of times. So what we can do for each Lucy, Mel and Tom is add together the number of times the pin landed point down and then the number of times the drawing pin landed point up. So if we start off with Lucy, the pin landed point down 31 times and the pin landed point up 14 times. So the number of throws that Lucy had will be 31 plus 14, which gives us 45. Next we can move on to Mel. The pin landed point down 53 times and the pin landed point up 27 times. So this means she had 80 throws in total. And finally, for Tom, the pin landed point down 16 times and point up 9 times. So Tom threw the pin 25 times. So therefore, Mel will give us the best estimate for the probability because Mel threw the pin the most number of times. So we can write this as our answer. So we can write that Mel will give the best estimate for the probability the pin will land point up because she threw the pin the most number of times. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for our answer. Stuart is going to drop the drawing pin twice. Use all the results in the table to work out an estimate for the probability that the drawing pin will land point up the first time and point down the second time. So the first thing we'll need to do for this question is work out the probability that the pin will land point up and then the probability that the pin will land point down. So if we start off with the probability that the pin will land point up, because we're using all of the results in the table, so our probability that the pin will land point up will be equal to the number of throws which landed point up divided by the total number of throws. So the number of throws which landed point up is in this row here. So it will be equal to 14 plus 27 plus 9. And then the total number of throws will be equal to 45 plus 80 plus 25. And if we simplify this down, this will give us an answer of 50 over 150. And we can use the same process for the probability that the pin will land point down. So the pin landed point down 31 plus 53 plus 16 times. And the total number of throws is still 150. And again, if we simplify this down, this gives us 100 over 150. So now the final thing we'll need to do is multiply these two values together. And this is because we want to find the probability that the drawing pin will land point up the first time and then point down on the second time. And if we put 50 over 150 multiplied by 100 over 150 into our calculator, it gives us a probability of 2 over 9. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the probability the pin will land point up and also point down. And we'll get our second mark for the correct answer. Solve the simultaneous equations x plus 3y equals 12, 5x minus y equals 4. So there's 2 ways we can do this question. We can either substitute one of these equations into the other equation, or we can add these equations together to eliminate one of the variables. Now if we're using the second method, what we need to do is multiply one of these equations so that it has the same coefficient on one of the terms as the other equation. So if we label these equations equation 1 and equation 2, what we can do is we can multiply equation 2 by 3 so that we can add these 2 equations together to eliminate the y term. So in order to multiply this equation, we need to multiply both the left-hand side and the right-hand side by 3. So 5x minus y multiplied by 3 will give us 15x minus 3y. And 4 multiplied by 3 is 12. So now what we can do is add equation 1 to equation 2. So equation 1 is x plus 3y equals 12, and then our new equation 2 is 15x minus 3y equals 12. And when we add these together, we can add all of the x terms, all of the y terms, and all of the numerical terms separately. So x plus 15x will give us 16x. 3y plus negative 3y will give us 0. And then 12 plus 12 gives us 24. So this tells us that 16x is equal to 24. So now the final thing we need to do with this equation is divide both sides by 16. And this tells us that x is equal to 1.5. So now what we need to do is substitute this value of x back into one of the original equations so that we're just left with the y term, and we can therefore work out the value of y. So if we substitute x equals 1.5 into equation 1, this gives us 1.5 plus 3y is equal to 12. And if we minus 1.5 from both sides, this tells us that 3y is equal to 10.5, and the final thing we can do is divide both sides by 3. And this tells us that y is equal to 3.5. So as you can see, we've worked out the value of both x and y, and these are our final answer. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get 1 mark for eliminating one of the variables. We'll get our second mark for substituting the value of x we worked out into one of the equations. And our third mark for the correct answer.